When the witch trials ended, the haunting began. They found the name scratched into the underside of the church pews. Not carved, not written. Scratched, like someone did it with fingernails. And the strangest part? Listen carefully to what happened next. Every name belonged to someone who'd already been dead for 300 years. So here is the question that remained unanswered for so long. If the witch trials ended, why did the village start hearing the condemned women praying again? Stay with me, because by the end of this story you'll understand what the village buried to survive, and what came back when the ground finally loosened. This is a late night warning story, not about spells and pointy hats, about paperwork, testimony, neighbours who nodded along, and a village that learned to live with what it did. We're going to walk through one night, the turning point, the worst moment, and what it cost the people who tried to fix it. Then I'll tell you what followed, because the haunting didn't end, it just changed addresses. One rule before we start. If you recognise this place, if you think you know the village, don't say the name out loud. Some stories don't like being called. The village sits in a shallow valley where fog gathers like it's got nowhere else to go. A single road in, a single road out, and a church that looks older than belief itself. I was there because a local historian, Gareth, asked for help cataloguing trial records, not the famous ones, the ones that never made it into books. He said the village wanted closure. That was the word, closure. But what he meant was this: they wanted the past tidied up, filed away, and made quiet. The first whisper came before we even opened the archive. It was in the church, mid-afternoon, no service, just empty pews and cold stone. Gareth leaned in close and said, almost joking, "If you hear singing, don't answer." I laughed. He didn't. We started with a list, names of the accused, names of the accusers, names of the men who signed the warrants, and one column that bothered me, a column labelled returned. Gareth said it was just an old clerical term, but his hand shook when he said it. That night, the fog came in early. It pressed against the windows like breath. We worked in Gareth's kitchen with the records spread out between mugs of cold tea. At 11:17, the first knock came from the front door. 3 taps, evenly spaced, like someone polite enough to wait. Gareth didn't move. He just stared at the door and whispered, "Don't." I asked, "Don't what?" He said, "Don't make it think we're awake." Then the knocks came again, same rhythm, but closer, not at the front door, at the kitchen door. I stood up without thinking, and that's when Gareth grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt. He said, "Listen," so I did. And underneath the knocking, there was singing, low, thin, like a hymn remembered by someone who never learned the words properly. Then, right in the middle of the hymn, someone spoke, not outside, inside the house, a woman's voice, calm, close. She said, "You wrote me down." And Gareth, pale as paper, whispered back, "I didn't mean to." The kitchen light flickered, and every page on the table lifted, just slightly, as if a breath passed over them. Then they all fell flat at once, like a hand pressing them down. We looked at the ledger. The returned column had new ink, fresh, wet. One word beside a name we hadn't read yet. Home. And that's where the night stopped being a history project. It became a negotiation. We went to the church because Gareth said, if it's going to happen, it happens there. We didn't bring cameras, we didn't bring holy water, just the ledger and a stupid amount of hope. Inside, the air was colder than outside. That's not poetic. It was wrong. Like the building was holding winter in its lungs. We walked to the front pew. Gareth pointed to the underside. "Look," he said. So I knelt down, and there they were. The names, scratched into the wood. Not old. New, as if the dead had been busy. Here's what we know so far. The village ended the trials, but it never cleared the names. It never admitted who lied. It never admitted who benefited. And now something was using the records like a door. We opened the ledger on the altar. Gareth's hands hovered over the page like he was afraid to touch it. And then the singing started again. Not from one place, from everywhere. From the stone, from the wood, from the gaps between the pews. A question for you, quietly. If you heard a voice you knew was impossible, would you answer it? Because Gareth did. He said, "What do you want?" And the church answered, not with a voice, with movement. The pews creaked one by one, like people standing. Then the worst part, the aisle filled with the sound of bare feet on stone, slow, measured, approaching. But nothing was there. I could feel it anyway, like pressure on the skin, like being watched from inside your own eyes. Gareth started reading names, not the accused, the accusers, the men who signed, the ones who only followed procedure. And with each name, the air got heavier until the last name, a family name, still on the village sign, still on the pub, still on the school. When Gareth said it, the singing stopped, and a woman whispered right beside my ear, "Returned." Then the ledger slammed shut by itself, hard enough to crack the wood of the altar. Here's my verdict. The haunting wasn't revenge, it was accounting. A balance sheet that finally got opened. The village thought ending the trials was the end of the story, but it wasn't. It was just the moment they stopped looking, and whatever was left behind kept reading. The last name we found under the pew was Gareth's. Remember the opening, names of people dead for 300 years. That was the hook. But the real horror is what I didn't tell you then. The last name we found under the pew was Gareth's. And when we left the church, the fog had cleared. The village lights were on, warm, normal, like nothing happened. Except Gareth's front door was open, and on his kitchen table, the ledger was waiting, open to the returned column with one new word, next. So here's my question for you. If a village could erase what it did by staying silent, would you keep the silence or say the names out loud? Drop your answer in the comments. If you want more midnight stories like this, calm, slow and unsettling, subscribe.